Now for our next problem, we are going to do 2.5 milliliters of cornstarch, and we want to turn that into teaspoons. So you would write that out. 2.5 milliliters of cornstarch equals question teaspoons. Like so. And then you need to figure out how many milliliters go into, well, how many teaspoons go into 1 milliliter. And 1 milliliter equals about 1/5 of a teaspoon. So that is something you would write down right underneath that. And however, since it is not good to have two different units, well, two different variables, numbers, 1/5 and 2.5, the fraction and a decimal. So you need to change one or the other. And I prefer to use fractions. So 2/5, well, actually I prefer to use decimals. So 1/5, if we're doing 1/5 out of 100 is 20. So you'd be doing, since it's a decimal, it would turn into 0.2. I'll show you how to do it the other way in a second, depending on what you prefer. And then after that, you would go ahead into your equation, 2.5 milliliters times 1 milliliter, because you need to make sure you're matching at the bottom. Well, actually 2.5 milliliters times 0.20, you change that 1/5 to a 0.20 if you're doing it the first way, teaspoons. And of course, you would cross out your mLs so that you are just left with the teaspoons. And then you would immediately go in and you would do the math. You would do 2.5 times 0.20. Now I have my handy calculator. These are the best calculators. And it tells me that the answer is 0.5. And now that we have finished with the conversion itself, you need to turn 0.5 into a fraction, because you're not going to cook with decimals. So 0.5 equals 1/2, because you know it's 50. And so your answer would be 1/2 of a teaspoon of cornstarch. Now, this top section up here is if you are using it, using decimals. If you want to use fractions, you're going to get the same answer. Still use the calculator. It'll just be a different line. Here, I'll show you. So instead of turning 1.5 into 0.20, 1/5 to 0.20, you would turn 2.5 into 2.5. So that means your problem would just still be set up in the same way, just with different numbers. So you'd have 2.5 milliliters times 1/5 of a teaspoon over 1 milliliter. And you would still mark out your mLs as seen right down here. You would still mark out your mLs. And then you would continue with the math as you have been. You do 2.5 times 1/5. And it would be over 1. So the great thing about this calculator is that it will multiply fractions for you, so it won't get complicated and confused. What you do is you would hit 2, then the A, B/C button, which is, excuse me, which is right here. It's right there under the PRB button, and you would hit it and have a little thing that looks like this, and that is like, it'll be like mixed number, this numerator, this denominator. So I'll do 2 and 1/2 times 1/5, and it gave me the answer, which is 1/2. So still get the same answer. It'll just automatically come out as a fraction. So it really doesn't matter which one you choose, you'll still get it right. So my answer is still 1/2 a teaspoon of cornstarch.